The snow fell like whispered secrets, blanketing the Vermont cabin where I stood, heart pounding, staring into Rose's eyes. She was my stepdaughter, 24, fierce, untamed, and yet, in that frozen moment, she was something more, something dangerous. I, Lena, 38, was supposed to be her anchor, but her gaze was unraveling me. It started innocently enough, or so I told myself. My husband, David, had booked this winter vacation for the three of us, a chance to mend the fractured bonds of our blended family. Rose, his daughter from his first marriage, had always been a storm I couldn't predict. At 16, when I married David, she'd been a sullen teenager, her green eyes flashing defiance. Now at 24, she was a woman brilliant, bold, with a sharp tongue and a laugh that could melt snow. I'd spent years trying to bridge the gap between us, but her walls were impenetrable. This trip was supposed to change that. The cabin was a rustic haven, all cedar walls and crackling fireplaces, tucked deep in the Green Mountains. David had been called away for work last minute, some emergency at his law firm, so it was just Rose and me. I thought it'd be awkward, but I didn't expect this. That first night, as we unpacked, Rose's hand brushed mine while reaching for a mug. Her touch lingered, her fingers warm against my cold skin, and I felt a jolt I couldn't name. "Careful, Lena," she teased, her voice low, her lips curling into a half-smile. I laughed it off, but my heart raced. It was nothing, I told myself. Just a moment. The next day we skied the slopes of Stowe, her auburn hair trailing like fire under her beanie as she sped ahead, daring me to keep up. I was no novice, but Rose was reckless, her laughter echoing through the pines as she carved dangerous paths. "Come on, Lena, live a little," she shouted, her voice carrying a challenge. I followed, breathless, not just from the cold but from the way her eyes sparkled when she looked back at me. That evening we collapsed by the fire, cheeks flushed, sharing a bottle of Merlot. She talked about her art, her dreams, her frustrations with her father's expectations. I listened, captivated, feeling the distance between us shrink. But it was the third night that changed everything. The snowstorm hit hard, trapping us inside. The power flickered and we lit candles, their glow casting shadows that danced across Rose's face. She sat too close on the couch, her knee brushing mine, her voice soft as she asked, "Do you ever feel like you're living someone else's life, Lena?" I froze. Her question cut too deep. My marriage to David was steady, predictable, but empty. I'd buried my own desires for years, convincing myself duty was enough. "Sometimes," I admitted, my voice barely a whisper. She leaned closer, her breath warm against my cheek. "What do you want, Lena? Really want?" Her eyes held mine, searching, and I felt exposed, raw. I wanted to pull away, to laugh it off, but I couldn't. Her hand found mine, fingers intertwining, and I didn't stop her. The air crackled with something forbidden, something alive. "Rose," I murmured, my voice trembling, "we can't." But she didn't move away. Instead she smiled a sad, knowing smile and whispered, "Why not?" That moment stretched, infinite, terrifying. I was her stepmother, bound by roles and rules, yet my body screamed for her touch. The fire popped, the storm howled, and I knew we were teetering on the edge of something irreversible. I pulled my hand away, heart hammering, and stood. "I need air," I said, fleeing to the porch, the cold biting my skin. Rose followed, silent, her presence a weight I couldn't shake. We stood there, snow swirling, and I felt her gaze like a brand. "Lena," she said softly, "I see you. I've always seen you." And then, before I could stop her, she stepped closer, her lips brushing mine, a fleeting, electric touch that shattered every defense I'd built. I stumbled back, gasping, my mind a storm of guilt and desire. "Rose, no," I said, but my voice lacked conviction. She didn't push, didn't speak, just watched me with those piercing green eyes, as if she knew I was already lost. The rest of the night passed in silence, but sleep eluded me. Her kiss lingered, a question I couldn't answer, a truth I wasn't ready to face. The next morning, I woke to find her sketching by the window, her face serene but her eyes guarded. "We need to talk," I said, my voice unsteady. She nodded, setting her sketchbook aside, but her expression was unreadable. I wanted to apologize, to set boundaries, but the words felt hollow. Instead I asked, "Why did you do it?" Her answer was simple, devastating. "Because I've wanted to for years." My breath caught. Years? How had I missed this? How had I missed her? As the day unfolded, the tension between us grew, a tightrope we both walked. We cooked breakfast together, our movements careful, deliberate, but every accidental touch sparked fire. I tried to focus on the mundane chopping wood, clearing snow from the path, but my mind replayed her kiss, her words. I was unraveling, torn between duty and a longing I'd buried so deep I barely recognized it. Rose, meanwhile, was relentless, her every glance a challenge, her every word laced with meaning. "You don't have to be afraid," she said that afternoon, as we sat by the frozen lake, her voice steady but soft. "I'm not." But I was. Terrified of what this meant, of what it would cost. David was due back in 2 days, and the thought of facing him with this secret made my stomach churn. Yet, as Rose sat beside me, her shoulder brushing mine, I felt alive in a way I hadn't in years. The snow kept falling, the world shrinking to just us, and I wondered how long I could resist the pull of her heart or my own. The lake was a mirror of ice, reflecting the gray sky and my own fractured thoughts. Rose sat beside me, her silence louder than the wind whistling through the pines. I wanted to speak, to draw a line we wouldn't cross again, but my throat was tight with the weight of her confession. I've wanted to for years. That afternoon we returned to the cabin, the air between us thick with unspoken words. I busied myself with chores, stacking firewood, boiling water for tea, anything to avoid her eyes. But Rose was undeterred. She moved with purpose, her presence filling the small space. When she handed me a mug, her fingers grazed mine, deliberate, and I nearly dropped it. "Lena," she said, her voice low, "you can't keep running from this." I wanted to snap back, to tell her she was wrong, but the truth was a blade in my chest. I wasn't running from her, I was running from myself. Dinner was a quiet affair, the clink of forks against plates the only sound. I tried to focus on the food, roasted vegetables, a recipe I'd perfected over years, but my mind was elsewhere. Rose's gaze was relentless, her green eyes catching the candlelight, and I felt exposed, as if she could see every buried desire I'd locked away. After we cleaned up, she suggested a walk. "It stopped snowing," she said, her tone casual but her eyes anything but. Against my better judgment, I agreed. The forest was a cathedral of snow, the moonlight casting long shadows. We walked in silence at first, our boots crunching against the fresh powder. Then Rose spoke, her voice soft but piercing. "I used to watch you, you know, when I was younger. The way you moved, the way you laughed. I didn't understand it then, but I do now." My heart stuttered. I wanted to stop her, to tell her this was dangerous, but I couldn't. "Rose," I said, my voice barely audible, "this isn't right. I'm married. To your father." She stopped walking, turning to face me. "Is that what you really want? To keep pretending?" Her words were a challenge, but her eyes were soft, pleading. I opened my mouth to argue, but nothing came out. The truth was, my marriage to David had been a slow Eros-Iona partnership built on habit, not passion. I'd loved him once, or thought I did, but the spark had faded long ago. Rose saw it, saw me in a way no one else ever had. Before I could respond, she stepped closer, her breath visible in the cold. "I'm not asking you to leave him," she said. "I'm asking you to be honest. With yourself. With me." Her hand reached for mine, and this time I didn't pull away. Her touch was warm, grounding, and for a moment, I let myself feel the possibility, the freedom. But guilt crashed in like a wave, and I stepped back, my voice shaking. "I can't, Rose. I just can't." She didn't argue, didn't push. Instead, she nodded, her expression a mix of hurt and resolve. "Okay," she said simply, and we walked back to the cabin in silence. That night I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, her words echoing in my mind. Be honest. But honesty was a luxury I couldn't afford. Or could I? The next day, Rose was quieter, but her presence was no less potent. She spent the morning sketching, her pencil moving with fierce precision, while I tried to read a book I couldn't focus on. The tension was unbearable, a current running beneath every glance, every accidental touch. By afternoon, I couldn't take it anymore. "We need to set boundaries," I said, my voice firmer than I felt. "What happened? It can't happen again." Rose looked up from her sketchbook, her eyes unreadable. "Is that what you want?" she asked, echoing her question from the night before. I hesitated, and she saw it. "Lena," she said, setting her pencil down, "I'm not trying to ruin your life. I feel something. And I know you do too. Her honesty was a knife cutting through my defenses. I wanted to deny it, to cling to the safety of my role as her stepmother, but the truth was undeniable. I felt it too. That evening as we sat by the fire, the air heavy with unspoken words, Rose reached for my hand again. This time I didn't pull away. Her fingers were soft, steady, and I let myself sink into the moment, just for a second. What are we doing? I whispered more to myself than to her. She didn't answer, just squeezed my hand, her eyes full of a tenderness that broke my heart. The next morning David called. His voice was warm, familiar but distant, like a memory I couldn't quite grasp. He'd be back tomorrow, he said, and I felt a pang of dread. Not because I didn't want to see him, but because his return meant facing the reality I'd been avoiding. Rose watched me as I hung up, her expression unreadable. "You okay?" she asked, and I nodded, though I wasn't. The truth was I was falling into her, into this forbidden space we'd created, and I didn't know how to stop. As the day wore on, the cabin felt smaller, the walls closing in. Rose was relentless in her gentleness, her every word and touch a reminder of what I was trying to deny. By nightfall I was exhausted, torn between duty and desire. "I don't know what to do," I admitted, my voice breaking as we sat on the porch, the stars above us sharp and bright. Rose didn't hesitate. "You don't have to decide tonight," she said, her voice steady. "But you deserve to be happy, Lena. We both do." Her words lingered, a promise and a challenge, as the snow began to fall again, soft and relentless, burying the world in my Resolvian white. The snow fell heavier now, a curtain between us and the world, and I felt trapped not by the storm, but by the truth Rose had laid bare. I deserved happiness, she'd said, but happiness felt like a betrayal. David's return loomed, a ticking clock, and I was running out of time to decide who I was. The morning was quiet, the cabin bathed in the soft gray light of dawn. Rose was already awake, brewing coffee, her movements deliberate, as if she sensed the storm inside me. I watched her, the way her auburn hair caught the light, the way her hands moved with quiet confidence. She was so sure of herself, of this, and I envied her certainty. "Coffee?" she asked, holding out a mug, her smile tentative but warm. I took it, our fingers brushing, and the familiar jolt ran through me. I couldn't keep doing this, pretending her touch didn't unravel me. We spent the day avoiding the inevitable, filling the hours with small tasks. We shoveled the path to the cabin, our breaths puffing in the cold, our laughter breaking the tension for fleeting moments. But every glance, every shared smile, was a reminder of the line we'd crossed. By afternoon the air felt heavy, the unspoken words piling up like the snow outside. I couldn't avoid it anymore. "Rose," I said as we sat by the fire, "we need to stop this, before it goes too far." Her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching. "Too far?" she asked, her voice soft but edged with challenge. "Lena, we're already there." She leaned forward, her elbows on her knees, her gaze piercing. "You feel it. I know you do. Why are you fighting it?" Her words were a mirror, reflecting the truth I'd buried for years. I'd spent my life choosing safety, marrying David, building a stable home, being the perfect stepmother. But Rose saw through it, saw the woman I'd locked away, the one who dreamed of more. I stood pacing, my hands trembling. "Because it's wrong," I said, my voice breaking. "You're my stepdaughter. David trusts me. I can't." She cut me off, standing too, her voice fierce. "This isn't about him. This is about us. About what you want, Lena. For once, stop hiding." Her words hit like a slap, and I froze, tears stinging my eyes. She was right, and I hated her for it. I hated myself more. The rest of the day was a blur, the tension between us a living thing. We cooked dinner in silence, the clatter of pans a poor disguise for the chaos in my heart. After, Rose suggested a game of cards, a desperate attempt at normalcy. But as we played, her foot brushed mine under the table, and I couldn't pretend anymore. I dropped my cards, my voice shaking. "What do you want from me, Rose?" She didn't hesitate. "I want you to choose yourself," she said, her voice steady. "I want you to choose me." Her words broke something in me, and before I could stop myself, I was across the table, kissing her. It wasn't soft or tentative like before, it was desperate, hungry, a release of everything I'd held back. Her hands were in my hair, pulling me closer, and for a moment the world disappeared. There was only her, only us, and it felt right in a way nothing ever had. But guilt crashed in sharp and cold, and I pulled away, gasping. "I'm sorry," I whispered, tears streaming down my face. "I can't do this." Rose didn't move, her eyes wet but resolute. "You can," she said softly. "But you have to want it." She stood, leaving me alone with my thoughts, the fire's warmth a cruel contrast to the cold in my chest. I sat there for hours, replaying her words, her touch, the truth I couldn't escape. I was falling in love with her, and it terrified me. The next morning David called again, his voice cheerful, oblivious. "I'll be there by noon," he said, and my stomach dropped. Rose was outside, sketching by the lake, and I watched her through the window, my heart a tangle of love and fear. I had to tell her we couldn't continue, that this had to end. But when I stepped outside, her smile stopped me cold. "Morning," she said, her voice soft, and I wanted to cry. How could something so wrong feel so right? We spent the morning in a fragile truce, talking about everything but Usher, art, my work, the weather. But the undercurrent was there, pulling us closer. By the time David's car crunched up the snowy drive, my resolve was paper thin. He burst in, all smiles and apologies, pulling me into a hug that felt foreign. Rose watched, her expression unreadable, and I felt like I was drowning. That night, as David slept beside me, I lay awake, Rose's words echoing. "Choose yourself." For the first time I wondered if I could. If I dared. David's return should have grounded me, but it only deepened the ache. His laughter filled the cabin, his stories of work a familiar hum, but I was elsewhere, caught in the gravity of Rose's gaze. She was quieter now, her fire banked but not extinguished, and every glance between us was a secret we couldn't speak. That first day back, we played the part of a happy family. We skied, cooked, laughed over board games, but it was a performance. Rose's hand brushed mine as we passed dishes, and I felt the spark, sharp and undeniable. David didn't notice, but I saw the flicker in Rose's eyes, a question, a challenge. I wanted to answer, but fear held me back. What would this cost? My marriage? My family? Myself? The second day, David suggested a hike, and we trudged through the snow, the forest a maze of white. Rose lagged behind, her camera in hand, capturing the world in ways I'd never seen. "Look at this," she said, showing me a photo of a frozen stream, its edges glinting like diamonds. Her voice was soft, but her eyes were loud, pleading for me to see her, not just the image. I nodded, my throat tight, and David called us forward, oblivious to the current between us. That night, as David snored softly, I slipped out to the porch, needing air, needing clarity. The stars were sharp, the cold biting, and I wrapped my arms around myself, trying to hold together the pieces of who I was. Rose found me there, her footsteps soft in the snow. "Can't sleep?" she asked, her voice low. I shook my head, unable to meet her eyes. She stood beside me, close but not touching, and the silence was heavy with everything we couldn't say. "Lena," she said finally, "I'm not going to push you. But I'm not going to pretend I don't love you." The word love hit like a thunderbolt. I turned to her, my breath catching. "You can't say that," I whispered, but my voice was weak, crumbling. She stepped closer, her eyes fierce. "I can. Because it's true. And I think you love me too." I wanted to deny it, to run, but I couldn't. She was right, and the truth was a weight I couldn't carry alone. I don't know who moved first, but suddenly we were kissing, desperate and raw, the cold forgotten. Her lips were soft, urgent, and I clung to her, my hands trembling. It was wrong, forbidden, but it was also everything I'd ever wanted. When we pulled apart, gasping, her eyes were wet. "Tell me you don't feel this," she said, her voice breaking. I couldn't. Instead, I turned and fled back to the cabin, my heart pounding, my world unraveling. The next day was torture. David's presence was a reminder of the life I'd built, the promises I'd made. But Rose was a siren, her every word and glance pulling me under. By evening I was a wreck, my emotions a tangled mess. David noticed, his brow furrowing. "You okay, Lena?" he asked, and I forced a smile, nodding. But I wasn't. I was drowning in guilt, in love, in the impossibility of it all. That night Rose cornered me in the kitchen, her voice low. "I'm leaving tomorrow," she said, and my heart stopped. "I can't stay here watching you pretend. If you don't want this, I'll go. But I need to know." Her eyes searched mine, and I felt the weight of her words, the finality of them. I wanted to beg her to stay, to tell her I loved her, but the words caught in my throat. Instead, I nodded, tears falling, and she walked away, leaving me alone with my cowardice. The next morning, Rose packed her bags, her movements mechanical. David was confused, asking why she was leaving early, but she brushed it off, citing work. I watched silent, my heart breaking. As she hugged David goodbye, her eyes met mine, and I saw the pain there, the love she wouldn't hide. "Take care, Lena," she said, her voice steady but her eyes wet. And then she was gone, her car disappearing into the snow, leaving me hollow. David tried to comfort me, assuming I was upset about Rose leaving. But it wasn't just that. It was the truth I'd refused to face, the love I'd let slip away. That night, as I lay beside him, I made a decision. I couldn't keep living a lie. Not anymore. The cabin felt empty without Rose, the silence a wound that wouldn't close. I moved through the final day of our vacation like a ghost, smiling for David, nodding at his stories, but my heart was elsewhere, chasing the taillights of Rose's car. I'd let her go, and the weight of that choice was crushing me. That night, as David packed for our return to Boston, I sat by the fire, staring into the flames. I'd spent years building a life that looked perfect, stable job, loving husband, a family I'd fought to hold together. But it was a facade, and Rose had torn it down. Her love, her courage had shown me what I'd been missing myself. I couldn't go back to pretending, not after her. "Lena." David's voice pulled me from my thoughts. He stood in the doorway, concern etched on his face. "You've been off this whole trip. What's going on?" I looked at him, really looked, and saw a good man, a man I'd loved, but not enough. Not the way I loved Rose. The truth rose in my throat, sharp and inevitable. "David," I said, my voice trembling, "we need to talk." It was the hardest conversation of my life. I told him everything, not about Rose, not yet, but about me. About the emptiness I'd felt for years, the parts of myself I'd buried to fit into our life. He listened, his face pale, his eyes wet. "Are you leaving me?" he asked, and I nodded, tears streaming down my face. "I have to," I said. "I'm not who I thought I was." He didn't argue, didn't yell. He just nodded, his shoulders slumping, and I knew I'd broken his heart. But I was breaking mine too, for a chance at something real. The drive back to Boston was silent, the end of our marriage a quiet agreement. When we got home, I packed a bag and left, needing space to breathe, to think. I didn't know where Rose was, but I knew I had to find her. I called her, my hands shaking, and when she answered, her voice was cautious. "Lena," she said, and I could hear the hope, the fear. "I left him," I said, the words spilling out. "I choose you. I choose me." There was a pause, then a soft sob, and I knew she was crying. "Where are you?" she asked, and I told her. An hour later, she was there, pulling me into her arms, and for the first time I felt free. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. Rose and I moved slowly, carefully, building something new. We faced judgment, friends who didn't understand, family who turned away, but we also found allies, people who saw our love and celebrated it. David struggled, but he respected my choice, and in time we found a fragile peace. Rose's courage became my own, and together we carved out a life that was messy, complicated, but ours. Looking back, that winter vacation was a turning point, a moment when I stopped running from myself. Rose didn't just change my life, she gave it back to me. And as we stood together, hand in hand, watching the snow fall outside our new apartment, I knew I'd made the right choice. Love, real love, was worth the cost. It was worth everything. Thank you for listening. Like and subscribe to get notifications about next videos.